Hey guys, if you haven't listened yet to the timeline series, I would suggest that you do before you try to understand the new series titled Timeline Series Revisited. This is number 1 of our new series, and what I'm going to do is just basically take a listen to each of the timeline series videos and then just talk about them. So, you're welcome to join us, of course, if you haven't watched the other videos yet, but it might be easier for you if you run through that series first. I think you might get more out of this series. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. That's cool. So in timeline series number 1, we talked about how Christopher Watt's wife joined Facebook, I think it was in 2007, and how from 2007 to 2009, she only posted a couple of times. So she clearly wasn't like addicted to social media or anything at all. In December of 2009, Christopher Watt's wife was able to somehow magically buy a home of her own with less than 10% down. In 2008, we had a major housing crisis. The bubble burst. By 2009, by the time that Christopher Watt's wife was able to purchase that home, there were some heavy-duty restrictions in place. The standards for the lending industry were much higher than ever before. Before the bubble burst, pretty much anyone and everyone could buy a house if they wanted to. They might have to wait a few months until they got their ducks in a row, but pretty much you could find a lender to work with you regardless of your credit or your employment history. But 2008 changed all of that, and by 2009, people were no longer able to just snap their fingers and find a lender who would give them enough money to buy a new house. So somehow, magically, Christopher Watt's wife was able to be what's known in the industry as a non-traditional borrower. She had just less than 10% down. General rule of thumb is the lenders really like to see 20% or more of a down payment, right? And that gets into other areas too. Things like PMI, which sometimes the cost of PMI can be so high that it makes the house purchase undoable because the borrower simply doesn't have the ability to pay such a hefty monthly payment. The whole income to debt ratio. Well, gosh golly, Christopher Watt's wife was able to buy a house with less than 10% down, and for about 6 or 8 months, I think it's been, I've been saying, boy, it sure would be nice to see that income verification form. But I haven't seen it posted anywhere on social media. With all of the things we've seen posted on social media, and oh my goodness, I mean it when I say, whoa, with all the things we've seen posted on social media, there's a certain photo floating around that I would really appreciate it if people would not send that to me. If you have seen or if you have been sent a photo that you think might not be suitable to share, then don't share it. And definitely don't share it with me. Ugh, some things you just cannot unsee. So, back to the house. How did she get that house? I mean, come on. What was she, 25 years old? Oh, she needed what? Was it a 4-bedroom brand new house? Yet in later years, she would make a video sitting out on her deck while her doormat husband was sitting on the floor in the house playing a little game with the kids. She would sit out on her deck, acting a little bit ruffled if she could still hear the kids, too. I thought that was interesting. And she would present that house purchase as if she was trying to make money on it. You don't buy a brand new house if you're trying to make money on it, for Pete's sake. And by the time she sold it, that concept was proven because she didn't make any money on it. And I know, everyone runs around saying, oh, yes, she did. She sold it for $15,000 more than she bought it for. Okay, do you think there's such a thing in the real world called closing costs? It was listed, wasn't it? So let's just take 5 to 7%, just roughly. 5%, 17,500. 7%, 24,500. Oh, but she made 15 grand, really? Because I guess unless her realtor said, oh, gee, honey, that's okay, you don't have to pay me. She didn't make a dime at all. Somebody had to bring some money to that closing table. It's called losing money on the deal, okay? And who knows how much money was lost on that deal. Because if the payments were late, then guess what that does on payoff day? That's right, folks. It cuts into your proceeds from the sale. So anyway, one thing that the people who are attacking us love to do is they love to scream out, prove it, prove it, prove it. I sound a little bit like Granny Fanny there, don't I? Well, they just love to say, prove it. And, I'd like to say right back at them, you prove it. Show us the income verification form. Let us take a look at the signatures on that income verification form. Now watch, they'll start creating all sorts of fake forms. Anyway, how on earth did Christopher Watt's wife qualify for that loan? And here we are over a year later. We've been asking this question, and we've yet to see any proof at all that she did. Well, I mean, she closed on the deal, so of course she qualified somehow. But you know what I'm saying? What information was that lender given to be convinced that Christopher Watt's wife was earning enough money to support that payment? Wouldn't that be interesting to see? I'm serious, the income verification form, let's see it. And let's see the income to debt ratio too. There should at least be a worksheet on that. That would be easy to produce, right? I would think. So that's one thing that I noticed in the timeline series video number 1 that still stands out this many months later. It seems to me, instead of running around just trying to shout people into silence, that the people who are attacking us would actually be producing proof, right? A couple of other interesting things that were covered in that video. One especially that just, I'm shaking my head thinking, okay, this makes no sense. In later years, Christopher Watt's wife would claim that in May of 2010, she was diagnosed with 3 separate serious diseases, all within 1 week. 3. Yet, she was posting right along in 2010. She was posting right along without mentioning anything at all about any diseases or being tested or being diagnosed at all. Now, don't you think if you're going to be posting right along that you might make a mention, especially given the fact that she makes a mention of every last detail, right? When she gets grooving in her Facebook addiction. Oh, and before you start in going, you're not a doctor, you can't diagnose that she had a Facebook addiction. I just want to say lighten up. It's a case discussion group, okay? Lighten up. So, I think that's really interesting that she didn't mention any illness or disease or diagnosis or doctor's appointment or any testing at all. And then, like I said, in later years, she would claim that in 1 week's time, she was diagnosed with 3 very serious illnesses. Isn't that amazing that a doctor would diagnose 3 very serious illnesses in 1 week? It just seems kind of odd, as does everything about this case. Interesting, too, that in August of 2010, after meeting Christopher Watts, then she started, all of a sudden, posting all about lupus. She posted about the pain she was suffering from. She posted about being so tired. She posted about her migraine headaches. And she also posted about memory loss. I thought that was interesting. I didn't realize that memory loss was one of the symptoms of lupus. Or maybe that was one of the symptoms of fibromyalgia. I don't know. She also complained of hair loss. She was posting about hair loss. I don't know, if you look at that list, that kind of sounds like a thyroid condition, doesn't it? And no, I'm not a doctor. You're right. I'm not a doctor. But, I think a lot of us know people with thyroid conditions that kind of looks like a thyroid list. Aches and pains, tired, headaches, memory loss, hair loss. I wonder, was she ever diagnosed with a thyroid condition too? Wouldn't that be something if all of a sudden they took a closer look at all of her medical records and realized that hypothyroidism could have explained all of her symptoms? That's not as far-fetched as you guys might think. Talk to people who have thyroid conditions, they'll tell you. They see doctor after doctor after doctor, and you know what? They get all sorts of different diagnoses, and then poof, they finally figure out that it's hypothyroid. They put them on a cute little pill, and then all of a sudden, they don't have fibromyalgia after all. So it's interesting that after she meets Christopher Watts, which was on August 10th, 2010, after meeting him, then she starts posting all about her illnesses. And she posts about all the testing that's being done, and the MRI, and the colonoscopy, and the other MRI, and the blood work. But nowhere in her posts did I find anything at all about the ANA, which is, I think, for lupus, right? Never mentions it. So that's interesting. She did talk a lot too in 2010 about being like a top fundraiser. Isn't it interesting how she was always the top? She was always the best. She was always the most successful. Kind of interesting. So she was, the top fundraiser, and she would hold yard sales, and she would say that the proceeds from the yard sale would go to the Lupus Foundation. And she had t-shirts made, and she would say the proceeds from the t-shirt sales would go to the Lupus Foundation. And she would hold raffles too. That's interesting. I didn't know that people could hold raffles. I wonder, is that how it is in North Carolina? Because I know in a lot of states you actually have to, be approved to do that. even churches and everything, I think, have to have certain approvals in place before they can actually hold a raffle. Huh. Yep. And she would say that all proceeds would be donated to the Lupus Foundation, of course. In one of her posts I saw, she said that if you are wanting to give a cash donation to the Lupus Foundation, that you can just go ahead and give it right to her, and she'll be sure to send it to the Lupus Foundation for you. What a big helper. So I don't know. What do you think so far? Seems to me that if the attackers really do not believe that we should be questioning any of this crap, it seems to me that they would want to make sure that with all of the stuff that's on the internet about this case, I mean, there is so much information all over social media about this case that it sure seems to me that at some point somebody would have leaked the mortgage docs, if you know what I'm saying. What do you think about how she didn't say a word at all about being diagnosed with 3 serious diseases all within 1 week in May of 2010? She didn't mention it until literally years later that she said she was diagnosed in that week in May of 2010. But then after she met Christopher Watts, then she was all about posting all about her illnesses. I wonder if that's when she really started, I don't know, believing that pretending that she was ill would be a good way to try to control other people. I mean, okay, let's say she was actually sick. Why didn't she mention it before? If she was actually sick, why were they doing all that testing after she was supposedly diagnosed? If she was actually sick, well, I'm sorry, I just don't believe she was. It's just my opinion. I don't think she was sick at all physically. I don't think she was sick at all. I think she was trying to rope Christopher Watts in, and I think that when she met him, she knew that he was that old-fashioned type of guy who treated women with respect. And if she told him that she had some serious disease, I think his protector mode came out. And she knew it. She instinctively knew it. I think she knew how to wrap him around her pinky finger. And I think, just my opinion, I think she used fake illnesses to keep Christopher Watts under her control.